Yo, welcome back to another video. It seems like we did top 10 Power Rangers themes, villains, Rangers. Now it's time to get to the nitty gritty, top 10, Power Rangers seasons rank. Um, I thought the videos would be a lot longer than the one I'm watching. I think the one I'm watching is 20 minutes. And I guess that's okay for some people. But I really feel like this could be like a 30 minute to an hour. It could have been a 30 minute to an hour video. You just ranking them everything. Yo, what's going on, Chris? How you doing, bro? Let's get right into it, y'all. Um, Here we go.
Hello, Internet. I'm the Disney Brain here with the second half of the top 10 best Ranger seasons. Now, obviously, the exact order of things will be a point of contention no matter what, as was the case last time, but most of you were really nice about it, which I appreciate. Here's the thing. I honestly believe that a really good argument can be made for all 5 seasons here, even some seasons that just miss being on this video, so it goes without saying to not get too hung up on the order. That said, it always came back to these 5 for me. 5 seasons that in some way, shape, or form highlight everything I love about this franchise and everything that's great about it. I don't think there's an objective answer for best season, nor will there ever be, so let's drop that pretense and simply discuss what each of these stories brought to the grander idea of Power Rangers. But, just before that, important point about honorable mentions. Last time, I told you all that I'd discuss them, something I don't normally do, but a fellow viewer gave me what I thought was a better idea, so instead, I'll be making a separate video that ranks every not top 10 season from 11 downwards. It's a completely foreign idea for me, but it's worth a try and we'll see how it goes. And now, with my babbling out of the way, on to the top 5.
Get NFL Sunday
Top
Ticket
5.
and catch your favorite
Why he
NFL
put top 10
teams.
is only
Watch
top 5?
out-of-market Sunday games live.
Okay, that's what's up. It's only 5. 20
Jungle
minutes?
Fury wins the dubious award of being better post-analysis, but falling 2 spots anyways. That's just how tight this list is. But the most underrated season of Rangers ever is still among the very best, and at the core of why is learning and development. 2 ideas I place heavy emphasis on when rating a season overall. It's crazy to think about, but rarely do we ever see fighting mean so much to a Ranger story. We obviously get plenty of fighting, but Jungle Fury really made it matter by making the ways and means one fights more important than the fighting itself. And that's on top of how unique a lot of the choreography we get is, which then goes on to help build the seminal part of this season. The
I don't think I
characters.
watched this one.
We've gotten seasons where only a handful of characters make an impact or learn anything at all. But here, in this rare gem of a
Might
season,
check it out.
everyone, from Casey to Fran, comes away with a deeper understanding of something or someone. And it's only after that understanding happens that the characters in question, except Fran unfortunately, can then advance themselves as fighters too. And from that comes some of the best use of character dynamics in any season period. We see
might
this
check it out.
mastery on display as soon as the opening bell rings, where one dynamic creates a second which fuels character growth. Growth paralleled by the big bad himself. And this is where Jungle Fury is at its best. The season-long narrative of Daishi/Jared and Casey constantly getting stronger, constantly trying to prove themselves after their initial confrontation. And in a move that I can only call poetic, it's that same conflict, once all the advancement is done, that ends up saving Jared and turning Casey into an official master. A sublime payoff created from writers who were meticulous about portraying the ways Casey and Daishi bounce off of each other. Both of them and RJ come away with a shared MVP for all of that, but the story never forgets Lily and Theo too, both of whom have important roles to play for themselves and for advancing other characters. And it all comes back to every character here being exactly what the show needed. And barring a few strange filler episodes, this show rarely, if ever, made a mistake in that all too important category. So while Dino Thunder set the stage for a story about three Rangers to start, guided by a wise mentor with personal connections to the villain, I strongly believe that Jungle Fury mastered that story. And they've got the stripes to prove it.
Is this number 5? This can't be number 1. There we go.
Yeah, I know, trust me. I feel really weird about this one too. Now, this doesn't, and never will, mean that any season replaces Lost Galaxy as my favorite ever. But, for the sake of a good list, there is simply more to consider than that. So, just like how I rated Sky higher than Kai, and Jen higher than my favorite Ranger of all time, this just made more sense to me. That said, Lost Galaxy does what no other season is capable of, placing death and sacrifice at the core of its story and forcing the survivors to trudge on despite their heavy hearts. It's not just bloodshed for the sake of it. There's a reason and a meaning to all of it. Mike doesn't just die in episode 2. He dies after inheriting the powers that Leo would go on to utilize, forcing Leo to prove that he is the true Red despite his guilt. Loyax doesn't just fall in battle. He falls after Maya befriends him, a Trakina servant that the gang has no reason to believe would be anything other than just another monster. And Kendrix doesn't just sacrifice herself. She knowingly took that risk because everything she's done on screen to that point was a testament to her selflessness and willingness to do whatever is needed for whoever needs it. But then what do we see from the team? We see pain. We see guilt, we see struggle, but they find a way to overcome it and not lose themselves to it. And therein lies the difference between how the heroes react to death versus the villains. Trakina lost her father and becomes more evil than ever before. Even her emphasis on beauty is tossed aside during her downward spiral. Perfect symbolism for becoming literally and figuratively uglier. And then, in Leo's defining moment, he follows the example of the brave men, women, and otherworldly beings before him, and did it using armor granted through Corone confronting her own guilt-ridden past and defeating it. These defining elements helped make Journey's End a finale that rivals even Countdown. But taking a step back from the thematics, this is just a beautifully presented season. The writers did an excellent job with the heavy stuff, but what also carried a lot of weight was the softer, more personal moments. That, more than anything, turned Lost Galaxy into my favorite season. Watching it way back then, watching it now, every character felt a little bit more real than your average Ranger. How interesting that a season that was all about leaving Earth behind ended up feeling more human to me. Maybe that's because in the dark void of space, connections mean more, matter more. Maybe when you only have so many people around you, all collectively making the sacrifice to leave their homes behind, a greater sense of community is almost natural. At the end of the day, in spite of some notable flaws, Lost Galaxy made me care more than any season ever made. And if only for that reason, it will always be the best to me.
I hated this season.
Do you know who you are? You're fresh grade. Cheers. Frasier.
The single most indefensible part of my original list was how in God's name Time Force ended up outside of the top 5. It's so top to bottom incredible in how it uses its theme to carry the story and the characters. It effectively creates a dire tone, given its subject matter. Rancic is for real, and proves it even before he escapes to the past. However, the brilliant irony of Time Force is that despite their original focus on stopping a shifting timeline, they soon realize such a mission is impossible, because time, and by extension people, will inevitably change, for better or worse. And internalizing that idea goes right along for the larger and more timeless defining feature of this season, how personal this mission is. The year 3000. 999 years removed from the Earth we know, and the element that connects these heavily divergent time periods the most are the same emotions that have driven humans since the dawn of our existence. And with that comes perhaps the single greatest character dynamic ever penned by a team of Ranger writers, a dynamic that is unrelenting and constantly pushes both Wes and Jen past where they started as characters, and with each successful step forward in their relationship, Wes makes a solid case for best Red Ranger ever, and Jen only further solidifies her case for being the best Pink Ranger ever. Their shared growth also presents a great contrast to Alex. That's why, when Alex returns, his hyper-conservative approach no longer flies. Consider this. The Alex we know was born through a version of Wes that never changed his destiny a millennia ago, thus giving context to why Alex believes that destiny cannot be changed. Small details like these are scattered all over Time Force and add tons of depth to an already stellar premise. And almost all of that aforementioned change comes back to Wes. What made him the perfect co-captain for this team was proving everyone wrong or right about him for the best possible reasons, in the best possible ways. And it all starts with first admitting to himself that not only was Jen right not to trust him initially, but that he needed to earn that trust, to fight for it, and along the way, help change others for the better just as he himself changed. Even Ransik is able to change because, and this is just beautiful, his love ended up being more powerful than his hate. There's a reason why this season shares a lot of connecting points with SPD. In both cases, rigidity needs to be stripped away to allow the truth to shine through. Time Force just does it better and with more characters, which is why it's way up here. And despite that heavy tone, this season still found a way to be hilarious when it wanted to be. And I'm here to tell you that if Lucas had a point to being here, like any point at all, and if Katie was just a little better utilized, this season would be number one. It had that much going for it.
I couldn't stand this show.
RPM is the kind of season you get when great actors are led by visionary producers who hire great writers. Importantly, none of those aforementioned parties felt the need to overly rely on more traditional Ranger elements, nor should they have. That's how you get seasons like Meg.
Okay.
It was the furthest thing from an easy decision, but after weeks upon weeks of planning for and eventually scripting this top 10, the final spot came down to a singular question. Which season did the most for Power Rangers? Which season represents its greatest accomplishment, not just on screen, but off of it? There's only one season where the very narrative itself on both sides of the screen could be described as, we need to be better, much better, or everything we've built comes crumbling down. And this is encapsulated in the best way possible by making the season-long objective saving the Ranger Patriarch. In a fitting but likely unintentional turn of events, the lowest point of the Zordon-era seasons ends with our heroes also hitting their lowest point. The power chamber is gone, Zordon is captured, and somehow they let Divatox of all villains actually win. But then, the Rangers travel to space, a locale that should have been focused on much sooner than this, and the space opera begins. Interestingly enough, Turbo as a season starts with graduating from high school, but it's in space that does the most with the Rangers having to grow up and navigate the great unknown without their father figure helping them. And just like the real world after high school, everything is more nuanced, everything is more complicated, and everything is more difficult to push through than ever before. Even convincing Andros to allow them to help was a struggle they've never known, since all Rangers before now were just picked. And then we get the tragic mystery of the kidnapping of Karone, which over time presents Astronema with the same insight the Rangers acquire, realizing that the world, the galaxy, life in general, isn't black and white. Heroes, villains, those simple labels are kind of outdated because there are far more people residing somewhere in the middle. And more than that, morality is a choice, not a birthmark. So even if you happen to be closer to one side than the other, it's never too late to change. The Rangers being able to sort through and handle the sizable hurdles in space presents was a great thing, But even greater than that was the methodical way the season allows Astronema to reconnect to Corone, a girl she hardly remembers, by letting her play around with and act upon feelings and emotions foreign to her. After Zane actually helps her, and Andros reveals himself to be her brother, there is a lot she needs to sort through, and the show never shortchanges us on that. But then what happens? Dark Spectre comes up with a perfect counter by stripping Corone of her free will. The same nuance and emotion that she'd been wrestling with is now gone, replaced by an overly obedient servant of evil. In fact, she ends up being so good at being sinister that she plots against and almost destroys Dark Spectre himself. The season, at that point, is no longer about stopping evil, as it had been with Rita or Zed or Mondo or Divatox. Astronema was the first villain in Power Rangers that needed saving. The first villain that made us think about the potential cost of a Ranger win. That's what makes her, in my mind, the single greatest villain in the franchise. But then you add the subtle internal struggles of Ecliptor, the conniving Darkonda, and the perfect anti-Rangers in the Psychos, and you've got a villain roster that's simply better than any we've seen. That was the hurdle the Rangers needed to clear, and they did it. Because when Carlos nearly quit, he was able to find his strength through the help of an old friend. When Cassie was pushed, she turned into a punishing force for those in her way. When TJ was hurt, he turned to his brain, and not as much as brawn, to win the day over crafty opponents. And when Ashley's simple charm brought out the best in Andros, both characters benefited. And Zane is a hilarious troll that adds some levity to all of that. This gripping story, this magnificent tale, was layered in ways that would set the standard for every great Ranger season that would come after. And taken all together, it represents what this franchise could accomplish when things weren't easy, when things weren't working out. This season could have been it. Power Rangers could have been nothing more than yet another nostalgic relic stuck forever in the 90s. But instead of packing it in, the writers and producers said, let's go all out. If we fall, then damn it, we're gonna fall with grace. 25 years later, we're still here. We're still fighting. And all because of the powerful way both the on-screen and behind-the-scenes heroes handled adversity. In Space saved the franchise. Not because it costed less, it very likely costed more. Not because someone else was buying the rights, that was years away. But because they simply made as great a show as possible with who and what they had. I know this will be hotly debated, as it should be. But for me, In Space earned the #1 spot. And lest we forget, a grand total of 0 of the seasons we talked about today would exist if it were anything less. And so brings a close to the top 10. As I mentioned, I'll be putting together a separate video for ranking the seasons that didn't make this list. However, that won't happen right away because I want to wait until after I fully review Super Ninja Steel. It'll likely be during said review that I'll be announcing the viewer competition I mentioned before, so stay tuned for that. Also, you guys should totally follow me on Wattpad, as this website
And
may...
this video has to be made forever ago. I gotta check. So anyway, this is recent. 4 years ago. Wow. How things have changed. That's why this is what it is. What's going on, Scott? Sheesh. I don't even know you gonna. What's good though? How you been? How you been? Did you let me see what? Okay, can you do that? Fuck it.